Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show's continued coverage of the CSM 16 with our election, with our interviews with the candidates. This time, we have Gay Pride Boom! That's the best.
Hello,
that's the only time you're gonna get that out of me, by the way. How you doing, man?
I'm very good, thanks. How is you doing?
I'm doing very good, and I can't wait to get to my first question about your name. But before we do, I will have to explain the rules. As always, I have 50 minutes to talk to the candidate about their candidacy in order to figure out why our people, my viewers, might be interested in voting for them, and what kind of voters that they are looking for and what kind of candidate they are. I have their platform in front of me, and I will be showing it off to you guys as we are talking, and I will disclose anything I know about them ahead of time, which at this point I've seen your CSM interview with CCP, but not much more than that. I think, thankfully, but we'll get to that too. But then after that, I give the candidate 10 minutes to talk about anything that they need to cover, anything that I might have missed, any major points that they want to, double down on, or final presentations. Once we're both satisfied, it goes over to the YouTube with all of the others into the playlist, so that way you can watch them all and become an informed viewer. Informed? Oh man, this is going to be a hard day, isn't it? You can be you can be an informed electorate, because that's what really matters in order to have an effective CSM, which is a powerful tool for us as a player, but only if we make it so. Oh, I made it kind of through there. So let's go ahead and start with the first question, which is like, okay, let's frame this. There are 45 candidates. I'm not going to get to them all, but there could be, I know there's going to be over 30 hours. There could be over 40 hours of candidacy videos. You want them to watch for 1 hour here, or just to get this out of the way, to respect my show, to respect our viewers. Please help me understand why we should take you seriously, given your name.
Well, all things aside, regardless of who it is that you meet in Eve, you shouldn't really take any of them seriously at first. If you are too quick to trust somebody, then you've lost a lot already. See, considering a lot of the people that I've interacted with, and a name is a name, and it stands for something that I believe in, which I don't know. It seems to trigger an interesting reaction out of a lot of players. But if you want to take someone seriously just based on their name, good luck in Eve. There's a lot of silly names out there and great pilots who can definitely do a lot of stuff. So,
right, but most of them aren't trying to get votes.
Oh, yeah. And for that reason, I don't know, just don't look at the name. Consider what my actions and what I have to say more so regarding the CSM.
Well, how old is your character? When did you make this character?
Let's see. Never remember the name. Looks like it was 2020.
Okay.
In April last year, so just barely over a year.
And how long have you been playing this game?
I've been playing this game well over 10 years.
Okay. So why wouldn't you be running with a character with a more like established history?
I don't know. Why not? It shows that someone who is, either just starting the game new, or in my case, I could probably very well claiming to be new, but I'm not. And running for CSM, it should be open for anybody who wants to represent Eve's community.
I mean, I agree with that, but there is a rule that if you have a more well-known name, that you might be changed to that. Yeah. Obviously, CCP didn't make you do that, so I mean, I'm not about to. But
this was probably the most notorious one that's received the most attention out of any of the tunes that I have, or any of like the tunes of my friends or their friends. Like, no one gets a reaction like Gay Pride, especially from particular areas of the world like Russia. You'll always get a very interesting response from them. It's different every time. Not all of it is hateful, there is some like curiosity or some, I don't know how to explain it. It's very unique. I'll just put it that way. And I don't know. CCP seemed fine with it.
So are you willing to reveal who else you are, just in case, just so people
I
know?
think we'll just stick it with gay pride for now.
Okay.
We'll just
All right.
keep it like that.
All right.
I like
Well,
secrets.
that's fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, it's how you run your campaign is up to you. I will before I completely leave your name behind though. There is the tinfoil in me is just alarmed by the fact that the C in your calm down and praise your new CSM overlord is like not highlighted when the rest are not. I
Oh yeah.
am I like is there a purpose for this? Is there a code?
Yeah.
Should I be looking for like the binary within the image or something like that?
I
Zooming
think
way in or something?
we might have ran out of ISK in making the images, so the guy just left that one out for some reason.
All right, fair
I'm gonna
enough.
have to gank him right after this. Thanks for pointing that out. I actually did not notice that.
Speaking of ganking, so that basically let's jump into that because that is effectively kind of what you do more or less. That's your shtick.
Yes,
That's what you're running for.
ganking is the forte of how I'm actually getting attention or getting votes.
Right.
Someone gets ganked and they get sent a mail that you voted. Congratulations. And
Okay.
they get sent a link to the forum and the CSM. So
And
it's not.
but as from that perspective, um, why do you feel like that's being underrepresented to CCP right now? Or is there something that concerned you? What caused you to run this year to be the I guess ganker candidate?
Because well, ganking this year alone. Well, I've been ganking for many years, um, not just on this tune, but on various accounts, and it's always been a very prominent part of Eve. It's kind of something that I don't know. I learned so much from it that I wanted to take it and use it as the front runner of this campaign because unlike anything else you will encounter in Eve, there's nothing like a gank in HiSec that will just like blow your mind and you'll just wonder what the hell just happened. And it's also quick. It sticks with you.
That's actually, I mean, that's a good point. Um, I think so. Part of the problem here is, and this kind of plays into your name, but it stems out of that, is the fact that your position is also not just controversial, but I think largely not well understood. Right, like the relationship between gankers and targets in Eve Online, I feel is different than in a lot of games, and that leads
Oh,
people to not
for sure.
appreciate. Yeah,
It's way different than any other game you'd ever play.
right. This
But
isn't just
that's what makes Eve the unique. Like that's the selling point of Eve. It's like you can literally undock anywhere and someone will get you. And there's other MMOs like Elite and Dangerous or um WoW or Guild Wars, and they all have PvP, but it's not quite like open PvP all the time like Eve would be. And I don't know, maybe Minecraft, but still, like there's always an option somewhere to turn that off or to choose. But Eve, there's one server, and it's
that.
always PvP.
That's fair, but honestly, in my opinion, the fact that it is everywhere isn't the reason why uh, it's important to Eve from like
No.
a hauler or miner point of view. So I guess
Oh,
let's
absolutely.
begin with the question of what, in your opinion, is the purpose and value of ganking in high security or suicide ganking in general.
I would say first and foremost, it is about sending a message that you can be destroyed in an area where you might have thought you were safe. And that's why they call it high sec, because it's high security, very safe space. And people just assume that, oh, I can just, dilly dally, do whatever I want. I can go and mine and go do groceries and leave my ship undocked for an hour and, nothing absolutely horrible is going to happen to me. And they'll set themselves on a journey to go 28 jumps from one section of space to the other, and you know, there's a there's a notion of ganking from that aspect.
Right.
That
Yeah. So to me, I think that the point is that it makes the experience of what you would see as prey targets more interesting, right? Like
hmm
imagine in a world where ganking didn't exist, like Eve Echoes. Why would you ever tank or put anything besides maximum yield on a mining ship? Why would you ever use anything besides a Hulk? Why would you ever do you use any kind of hauler besides a maximum yield or full size hauler? The point is that you have to mitigate the risks versus the throughput, and that therein
exactly.
is the choice, right? Like this goes back to the guy who made, I can't remember, one of the designers developers from Sid Meier's Civilization, not Sid Meier's but another one. He said that video games are a series of meaningful decisions, right? So
hmm
if gankers didn't exist, then there would be no meaningful decision really in
Yeah,
mining whatsoever. It would just be find optimal, do optimal.
yeah. There'd be no risk and reward.
Right.
But to that, I feel that there should be more risk. I mean, sorry, no, more reward in it. There's already enough risk, but there isn't enough reward,
For the
especially in high sec.
for the prey targets, for the non-ganker, the people who you would gank.
Yeah, for the non-gankers.
Right.
I mean, you have people that are just doing what they do for pennies in comparison to something that you might find in nullsec or a wormhole space or low sec. And it's very interesting that you'll see some of the targets, they have blinged out modules, and it's insane like how much they're packing on these ships.
Right.
And regardless of where they get it from, it's very expensive and it's very stupid to put these things on your ships and be so careless with it. And a frequent response I'll get is, take your PvP to nullsec. Well, it's like, why don't you take your PvP to nullsec?
Right.
I've been to nullsec already, and I'm taking it to highsec.
And I think that the thing that people need to realize is that like this isn't an exploitation of the game mechanics. This is a
No,
manifestation of the game mechanics. I like
to add
to
risk.
Right. I like to reference people like Code and other gankers as like the weather, right? They're a natural phenomena. They and in order to beat them, you basically it takes a better understanding of the rules at play. And I think that a lot of people don't appreciate the complexity of the rules at play in high sec until they start getting into into these kinds of gameplay, the play counterplay of, you know, not just can I survive a gank, but can I avoid a gank? How do I avoid a gank?
Yeah,
How do you come and hunt me even though I'm trying to avoid you? That is actually a very interesting gameplay.
yeah, and that mentality, by the way, should be applied all throughout Eve, not just in high sec, because you should be under constant vigilance, situational awareness that you can be hunted in a world where you can be killed. Murphy's law applies that you will be killed at some point.
So you're saying that you want them to have more reward, but so like I doubt that that could just be better mining because everybody wants better mining for the guys so that way the miners will mine there so that way they can kill them, right? Like whatever.
Yeah,
But what about like haulers is one of those things that I think about, and one of the things I get told one of the ideas that comes up among people who get ganked a lot or among that community is the idea of having countermeasures, the ability to potentially destroy part of the cargo or other mechanisms that they could have fit. Basically, especially with the absent now with the lack of warp core stabs, it really
oh
feels
yeah.
that once the gank has begun, there's no more counterplay. I like to say that it's already too late at that point. But
Well, you could save the cargo technically by jettisoning it before you could get killed.
right, but they don't see that as saving it because they're losing the field. You're going to just the ganker's going to take it anyway. So they would actually
hmm
they want it to be destroyed. They want
unless they're using a smart bomber to at
it's
the
fair.
end, which then the cargo container would be destroyed and they'd lose everything.
That would be pretty hilarious. But no, but like maybe a better ECM module or some sort of trick up their sleeve in order to be able to get away. Something like the active warp core stab that perhaps if you like or would you like a ADCU, so that way if they pop it, their resistances go really really high. So if they do it at the exact right time to defend against the gank, then they might be able to hold out. Would you be in favor of something like that?
Um, Not so much. I would like, haulers to actually be able to haul more stuff and, miners to hold more ore to make it, more beneficial for them, but also more beneficial for the ganker, you know, just increase things. But like the haulers already have things like, you know, more countermeasures than they need, including just like the instant align features, the cloaking and all that. But I would like more reward for them.
Well, the issue is that well, I guess if they have especially an additional character for like a webbing alt or something like that, you can get through a potentially bad situation. But uh the idea is that like you jump in, you see the stuff, they feel like that there's no more counterplay, which you could argue sorry, you're already done. Like
Yeah.
if the trap is sprung, then all of the counterplay is too late. But the problem with that answer is that makes all of the counterplay invisible, and
Hmm.
therefore they
Well, a
don't
quick answer
feel
to counterplay is scouting.
right. But like the thing is that the person that experiences this, it doesn't lend themselves to feel like they have something that they could do to fix it, even though there are things to do to fix it, because there is no obvious solution to being ganked. It from the outside, it's easy to just accept it as being an invalid thing. Do you see that as a problem at all?
Where ganking is perceived as overpowered and like no countermeasures can be done.
Right, right. Like they say, well, what can I do
Um,
about it? And then when they focus on what can I do about it in the active moment, right? What can I do about it when the
yeah,
gank is happening? Can I put Logi there?
a,
Can
l-
I,
a lot
duh.
of them just think I want to shoot back at these gankers,
That's fair.
which doesn't do anything. They don't think rationally,
But
um, but
let me give you a
as a
different
whole,
example, if
go
I
for it.
can. So like AFK cloaky camping, right? People complained about this
Hmm.
for years. Now we get the new observatory. The new observatory does almost nothing to a valid cloaky camper. All it does is get rid of AFK cloaky camping. So it doesn't actually like stop cloaky camping, but it stops the complaint about cloaky camping. So is the issue not that there isn't tools, but that there is no obvious tools, so that way the people feel like there is nothing that they can do, especially on these ships that they can't tank more or something like that.
Yeah, well, the tanking has improved slightly, at least for the barges. Some of the old barges I look on a Procura and it's like 700 effective hit points on it, which was nuts. And it used to gas mine, whatever. And now it's like the strongest mining ship in the game below the skiff. And haulers, the change that they made to haulers specifically for the Cloaky and the deep space transport and the blockade runner, which there could be some change that got done to haulers, I feel. Maybe, for sure. But
Yeah, the thing is, what I feel like is not that they even need a good solution. They just need to not feel powerless. They need to have like
yeah.
something that maybe even
Well,
has a
the
10% a
players
burst
need more
jammer
information.
or something like that. Something with a
Hmm.
small chance of working, just so that way they can feel like they're doing something in the moment. But that's just one way of looking at it. I appreciate you exploring that option with me, because the reason why I wanted to explore that is because it is very easy to write off a ganker as just simply being like, I want my victims to be, you know, uh, to be victims, really, right? Like I
Oh
just,
yeah.
I
I
only
mean,
want ganking ever or whatever. Yeah,
as a ganker, I do want them to learn something. I
right.
mean, obviously, I do want them to be victims at first because hey, it's a juicy kill. It's yummy. but ultimately I do want them to learn from the experience and to better themselves afterwards, because there is so much that a new player can learn from a gank. I mean, old players, they'll usually stick to whatever they have learned years ago and, tell anyone off for thinking otherwise. But new players, there's so much that they can learn from a gank, and that they often complain about, oh, I'm so powerless, or I have nothing that I can do to stop this. Well, you first learn that A, you're not safe in space. B, there are certain people who play in space who, actively hunt other players. So you learn, oh, maybe I can set these guys as negative standing. And then if I look in local and I'm paying attention, I can avoid these things. And eventually you kind of learn like to kind of scout out to feel of areas. And, in Eve, from what I've experienced, like there's nowhere that you can go without getting like you have to die a few times to get the feel of an area. If you haven't died at all playing Eve, then I don't know, either you've been stupidly lucky, or you're not doing the right things to enjoy the game, because you should be able to explore and you should be able to die lots to know the places that you're going and the people that you're dealing with. And not all of them are horrible monsters. We're just fun.
Right. I think that part of the point is that if no one punishes you for your mistake, you don't know it's a mistake, right? Like if
Exactly.
you're running around with a ship with no tank and no one's there to shoot you, then no
Mm.
one then you never even learn how dumb it is to do that, right?
Or I'm running around in a hauling ship carrying 1 trillion worth of plex or something. I like, there was these ridiculous things you'd see on the old Z Kill or Battle Clinic, I think it was, where people were just losing stupid amounts of plex and shuttles, and it's like then they would became dedicated hunters for this because people kept on doing it. And it's like, I don't understand personally why people do these things, but they do. And hopefully when you lose something very trivial like a venture or a barge, it kind of teaches you to look out, that there are people that do this. And it's a cheap lesson learned for something that you could be doing so much later that is incredibly dumb.
So you were talking about it being used for learning and whatnot, and I do agree with that. I think that some people may not necessarily appreciate that in its fullest, but one of the key pieces to this is like the Rasnaborg, right, that was introduced, and even now the Triglavian roaming packs, right? These things represent a threat to players that are very much like ganking, right? So
Oh yeah, and I
again,
love the tricks.
yeah, again, these gankers are not invalidating the miners or the haulers gameplay. They are manifestations of the threats that CCP intended to be in the game. And
Hmm.
therefore that's one of the reasons why the trig exists as well, to be part of this whole process, right? What they've learned is that people that undergo one of these events where they get killed or whatever, they actually end up staying longer. That the act of, the negative event of getting killed is not as bad as the boredom of playing for a week without with nothing interesting happening. And therefore they actually introduced AI gankers to help people not only understand that Eve is dangerous, but because it's an
Oh yeah.
AI, right? But because it's an NPC, it's easier for the player to process that this is something I should have avoided, right? Whereas with a player, I think
Hmm.
it might be a little bit easier to feel like this person's cheated at me, or this is just a powerful player picking on a new person or something along those lines. But if the rat kills you, then you kind of feel like something went wrong, right? So to that end, do you feel like the Rasnaborg and the Triglavians have helped in making sure do you feel like the player base is now more prepared, and do you feel like that has maybe come from these kinds of things being added to the game?
Yes and no. One of the things that did bring me back to Eve was the whole Triglavian thing. Like, I love trigs, and when I started getting back in, I went straight to the invasions, and then right after the invasions, I went right into ganking afterwards, because it was such a, I don't know. There was an area where the invasions had catered to people who liked ratting, to people who liked doing PvP for the limit final liminality
Right.
flipping of systems, and people who like ganking because there was lots of blingy ships on the field, and ganking could help flip either of the sides. And I feel like CCP did a beautiful job in incorporating all of these elements together to a player base where they were like, okay, now you guys have to fight to save your system. Go for it. You have X amount of time. And it brought people from all corners of the universe together in one area. And I honestly think there could be more of that. There should be more of where Triglavians not just invading, minor systems or near the wormholes, but just tearing through high sec, unpatrolled. Keep people prepared. Maybe change things up a bit. In a year, people will be able to fight back for the systems that were lost, or fight the systems that were fortified, or something like that. Keeping keeping the mechanics changing of the game is an element which will keep the player base interested, but it also turns a lot of people away. Changing aspects of the game where players are forced to take a stance and make a decision which will affect Eve, whether temporarily or permanent. Um, in the case of where, Nyarja fell, this is something, if you told me this 5 years ago, I would have told you, share those drugs that you're taking.
Yeah.
There's no way that CCP will ever change high sec to low sec or null sec. There's no way. But last year they did, or whatever it was. It was last 2020 that they did this. Can't remember.
Uh,
Time has gone by so weirdly this year.
yeah. I can't remember exactly when chapter 3 started at this point, but yeah, I
But
remember.
it was wild, and it brought everybody together. And of course, the miners loved it too, because there was all this lovely Rakavine and Tau to mine in these systems, and it was there like every single day. But boy, was it dangerous! And you know, CCP really hit it on the nail for that one. Like I applaud them on all aspects of that, and I want to see more of that, where players are given more power to change their game.
One of the things I actually really liked about the invasion systems when it came to the mining aspect of things, and I want to know your opinion of this as the ganker, but what was interesting about it was actually way more easy to be protected against gankers in these sites, especially
Oh
the
yes,
major conduits. You could be in a position where the ganker could not know how to land on you on
yeah,
correctly.
because there's a centralized warping point. There's no way for
Exactly.
them to bounce off,
Well, and
and
you don't know how the site is oriented until you land on it. So you'd have to land a scout first. But
yeah.
the
In
thing I
that
liked
case, you
about
would
that,
just
hmm?
in that case you would just slow boat a ship and think that if they were AFK, they wouldn't
Right.
move or anything.
But my point is that what I liked about that was that the invasion systems were spooky. There
Oh
were
yes,
it was scary. There was red
they had
stuff everywhere.
music.
There was the music was dark. There
I
was
love the
bad
music.
dudes running around everywhere, and they could theoretically warp into some of these sites. But
Yeah,
if you knew how to use the systems, then you were actually safer and mining significantly better stuff in HiSec than anywhere else in HiSec. And so again,
precisely.
if you understood how to use the systems, you could get a lot more out of it. And if you didn't understand how to use the systems, it was either a brick wall or death. And that is, I think, a really good way for Eve to be.
Yeah, but I also think, in addition with this, ganking should be introduced into the tutorial. Like the moment you undock, you should be instructed to go and attack somebody, and just I don't know, try to learn from the experience, or be thrown in a system where there are gankers, so you can learn from that. Either way.
Yeah, there are two missions that you have to die in order to teach that dying is a thing. But I actually think that they kind of cheated out because they got tired of people bringing their good ship into it accidentally. But like, I really do agree that there should be a mission. Maybe it gives you the ship for the mission or whatever, but it's one of those missions where like they tell you an objective, but it's a trap. Like you actually get betrayed halfway through, and so you just get ganked. You literally get ganked. It's not like harder or anything. Like a tornado comes in and just blaps you. And they're like, oh, yeah,
Hmm.
this is a thing that can happen, blah, blah, blah. Even Concord shows up. You could do the whole thing and make it even look like a player did it if you wanted to.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
But so let's help me bring this home though. Like clearly ganking is an important part of the game, but with the things like Rasenborg, it shows me that CCP I feel understands that probably better than a lot of the player base does. But like, what about you being on the CSM will be useful to us as the player base, CCP? Like, why do we need a ganking CSM representative?
Because it's probably one of the most, personally, I feel, elite mechanics of gameplay that you can exercise in Eve, because you're fighting against all odds. You're fighting against Concord faction police. You're fighting against players that are able to shoot you, and you're fighting against time to the amount of um, time that you have to respond until police come. And there's many forms of ganking that can be attributed to forms of gameplay, but it's also in an area of space where everybody begins. Like when you start out Eve, you start out in high sec. You don't start out in null sec or low sec or wormhole space. Your journey starts in high sec, and a huge portion of high sec is either ganking or mining or hauling or PVEing. But that reward, I don't see the reward in it, which is why I don't do it. I used to PVE, but there was no reward for it until I just started hunting other people that had more blingy mods for some reason, and I don't know why they do it, but they do it. And
So I understand that like HiSec it has a lot more complexity than people give credit, right? Like a lot of people say nullsec is the most elite because it has like the most mechanics at play, or in other words, like sovereignty and bombs and bubbles. But I would argue that potentially HiSec actually has more mechanics in play. It's just you have less control over many of those mechanics. That being
oh yeah.
said, ganking basically boils down to a math problem. You can scan them, know what they have, know what you need, and then
Hmm.
if you have it, then they die. It's not
But
like,
there's
where does the
also
elite
things
part of
like
it?
server ticks. There's also there's server ticks, and there's so much that people can be doing to prevent it. If people are baiting a gank target, which has been done, people think that they can survive a gank, and either they do or they don't, and they get blapped. It's not like ganking is 100%. Oh no, like there's a lot of failures in there. Ganking is
I,
almost certainly not God mode enabled. It certainly seems like it, but
I think that there's a pretty big gulf from God mode enabled and elite, right?
oh yes.
Like, like it's not one or the other. I mean,
I
I
mean,
like I said,
God mode, I would put as nullsec for their 300-man fleets and their bubbles on gates. I mean, that's probably, the other argument um, of what like elite PvP is really is. It's like there's I've always heard that argument. People between nullsec and highsec.
that's fair. And but like, and I get the fact that it probably is unappreciatably complex to a lot of players when it comes to the execution of it. But
Oh yeah.
again, like
People think it's personal. It's not.
what?
It's merely curiosity and, you know, initiative driven to weed out anybody who might, be doing something silly or stupid, like traveling around with 10 billion in your cargo hold. Like, why? Why would you do something like that?
But do we need a CSM member to go to Iceland to tell CCP that it's dumb to fly around with 10 billion?
Oh no. They can for sure do that. But I believe that ganking should be a relative and accepted form of playing Eve online. And, more people should know about it because it is certainly fun. And more people should be able to change high sec, eliminating the possibility that Concord or faction police might spawn, changing the mechanics of the game where the player the player base gets to decide what happens to the system that they live in. Implement more things like the Triglavian invasions, because there certainly haven't been enough of that. We definitely need more of those down the line.
Well, let's look at warp core stabs for a second. Now, let's assume that
Okay.
the warp core stab change was a good design change. Big assumption, I know. But let's just in a world in which that assumption is valid, let's look at it for a second. In this case, now I can fit a low slot mod that if the opponent brings a basic warp disruptor or a basic scrambler, I can beat them, right? If they bring, but you can add, you can the person who's doing the attack can add extra effort, right, and beat my insurance in the warp core stab. So in this case, I can bring an extra mod that forces you to bring an extra mod. If you didn't bring your extra mod, my extra mod wins. I get away. That's a play counterplay situation. Don't you agree that it would be interesting if we experimented with more of those, more different plays that, like, right, like when it comes to exploration, we have ECM drones, we have afterburners, we have you have cloak. Sorry, the stab. You know, there's different. There you have ECM mid slots or burst jammers, which I guess doesn't matter as much anymore. But you get what I'm saying. Like, there's different countermeasures you can play, but you can't play all of them. And so, depending on what they bring, your different countermeasures will be more useful. Wouldn't that make the whole thing better for everybody?
To introduce more countermeasures?
Countermeasures and counters to those,
yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it keeps the game interesting. But I don't know. Eve to me has always been a sense of cat and mouse, not necessarily with modules or ships or numbers, but just about timings. Like, you know, always, I don't know, just not things happen according to schedule, even though you'd like to, you know.
Well,
but
one of the other
more countermeasures make it more interesting for the gang for sure.
What if you had some sort of mechanism that would allow you to deploy something through a gate to discover the local or the grid on the other side? That way, because one of the issues is
like
that
a periscope.
Yeah, a probe. Yeah, so a scout,
an actual probe.
Scouts are very strong. You know, scouts are ultimately the solution. But a lot of these guys are also like solo pilots, so it's kind of like I'm afraid of that feeling like a cop out design wise to be like, yeah, if you just had a second character, you'd be fine. You know, like. So wouldn't it be interesting if they had, like, if really the hauler's counterplay should happen before the gank happens, shouldn't they have other tools for then?
In that case, I would recommend that, you know, they join a group where someone will take them with them and scout for them, because that's another thing is Eve. It should be a multiplayer game through and through, because you try to do anything single player in Eve and you'll die of boredom, you'll die of frustration, and you'll just quit. You know, it's hard not being able to. I mean, if you're able to learn things quickly, great on you. But like, it's a multiplayer experience. There's a huge social aspect of Eve, which should be enjoyed. You know, like if you're there just to play on your own, you know, go play Harvest Moon. You know, there's plenty of other solo games out there that are for you, and Eve isn't one of them. And if you don't have a second account to scout, then, you know, go find a group of people that, you know, you can relate to, whether your interest in Eve is mining, ganking, living in nullsec, lowsec, wherever, you know.
Yeah,
there is a group out there.
I will say that we have a reasonably large group, and it's kind of hard to find just somebody who's willing to come and web your freighter at any given time, but not impossible. Not impossible. You're absolutely correct. But maybe you're right. I think that having more different kinds of rewards in order to make that viable or interesting.
And more rewards for PvPing, like more rewards for player interaction. Like, that could be something that CCP could implement into the game. Like, you want your freighter webbed by somebody, hire like a random player, like Uber but for Eve. You know, like, I genuinely, like, you have someone who is scheduled to web freighters throughout HiSec or whatever, and, you know, you just hire them, and they have a reputable service where freighter pilots have you know, done it. But it is like, it's not a PvE interaction, but it is, because it's player interaction with player, you know, not player interaction with environment or NPC. And there should be more of that, where players are forced to do things for other players just because, you know, that's that's where the joy in Eve comes from. That's where the best stories happen in Eve is through other players' interactions. There's no heroic story of a player doing anything with an NPC except the great fight that nobody saw with the Trigs and the Drifters. That
Oh
was
yeah.
another thing entirely.
I think it was wasn't it a Blood Raider fob or Blood Raider Sodio plus Drifters
Mm-hmm.
or something like that? Yeah, it was this big fight that apparently happened one night that nobody ever saw, which I'm pretty sure inspired a lot of the later stuff with invasions, but that's neither here nor there. So let me check the time. Yeah, let me think. I guess so. What exactly do you propose then? Because it doesn't sound like you're advocating for much change
Uh,
besides just
well, I
higher
want a
rewards.
change in high sec.
Right.
Change in
So
high
it,
sec gameplay, more availability for players to change the systems that they live in. You know,
oh,
preventing stagnation. And that can be done through ganking. Um, uh, what else?
well, they already have that. So what would more look like?
Well, they had the trig invasions, but allow players to actively remove Concord and change the system for a day, or something like implementing something similar to faction warfare, but specifically for high sec.
Right. Actually, that is
And
one of the. Sorry, go on.
oh, I was also going to say implement more PvP orientated tutorials like ganking, like just interacting with other people, because that's what Eve needs. Less antisocial people who don't want to have anything to do with you.
Right. One of the things that I've suggested or talked about since invasions, especially with how close it was to faction warfare, is the idea that systems in high sec between the areas of the wars, the Amar and Mimitar or Galente Kalari, could temporarily go low sec as the war spills over there and then could be fought
Mm-hmm.
over. And then when the fight is done, it would go back up, but it would change ownership from Galente to Caldari depending on who won, and those would
Yeah,
be like semi-permanent keystones that the faction could use to keep their number
and
their
give
tier up.
them specific bonuses for mining or whatever to be
Well,
done in that system to
I
their faction.
I was just yeah, I was thinking it would just play into because in faction warfare there's the meta game where the more systems you own, that's worth points, and that's what pushes you up a higher tier. So those
Mm-hmm.
systems, since they would be not just be able to take up any time, they would function as like safe points to help secure your side, which I think would be interesting to say the least. Um, but so, do you think that the surgical strike change was good or bad?
The surgical strike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the update that
Um,
increased short range damage, reduced resistances. It impacted a lot of places, and a lot of people, like wormholers, are upset about it because of the change in wormhole metas. But it also made ganking a lot more effective with both the ammo used and the ability to defend against it.
yeah, I mean, doing a lot of damage in a short amount of time. I'm not going to say no to that. That's my forte right there. But that's pretty much all of Eve gameplay, and I it's a small change, but I think they could be doing more just to promote people going out and losing ships and dunking things. It's so much fun to gank, and everyone should do it. And whether you're mining, hauling, or living in low sec or null sec, people should be driven more to appreciating uh, what ganking has to offer in Eve.
So,
But I don't know about the surgical strike. It's maybe CCP is catering right to ganking, like with the whole core stab, like earlier you mentioned. That's now an active module. There's been a few other things that they've done, but it seems like CCP is catering into that direction. in my
Yeah.
personal
Well,
opinion.
that's fair. And I want to reinforce something one more time, just based on some of the comments in chat. Like I agree that ganking is an incredibly important part of the game. It is part of the core game design, and therefore gankers are not necessarily terrible people. They usually have economic interests in play, like they are doing it for good reason. And B, as we've talked about, like there's a lot of rules and systems in play, and it's really designed as such that if you learn to be more survivable than your competition, then guess what? You're going to live and they're not. And that's ultimately
Hmm.
what makes it more valuable. Like think about it. If ganking wasn't a thing, then tritanium would be almost worthless. I mean, like it is almost worth, it's not like super valuable now, but like think about it. If everybody could just
It
max
could be
fit
worth more.
Hulk all the time, and that was the only way that anybody mined, because and you could strip out if you could just bring rogue walls, whatever, like the more uh easier it is to access these materials, the more that material will be worth less. So in the same way, like these things that make these tasks challenging are the very things that allow them to be rewarding, which is also why I'm concerned about this idea of like we should make them more rewarding, because it's like, how do you do that like without disrupting balance in some way? That's
I
why I was
I
encouraging it through
mean,
countermeasure.
I remember back in old Eve, like the barges were shit tanked, and but the ship prices were decent. Like I could get a hurricane for something like 25 mil to 30 mil, and now I'm looking at them and it's 100 mil for a hurricane. And it seems like CCP keeps gearing these industry changes to make, I don't know, mining harder. It doesn't really make a difference to the ganker what's happening, but it's less rewarding for them where they have more tasks at hand to achieve for something so simple.
Wait,
So
who has more tasks to achieve?
the miner,
Oh,
in terms of industry, like because CCP keeps changing it around with minerals, they move a lot of them from high sec into low sec,
got it.
and now of course they're doing the whole update where battleships and above have to have a bunch of extra steps with them.
Yes. Yeah, I get you.
So it's a lot more work on their end. Is it more profitable? Maybe slightly, not so much so, but I don't know. I think CCP could be going in a completely different direction with this without changing what the miner does, but just how they are rewarded with it. And you know, there used to be permanent ice belts in Eve years ago, and now they're only existent for a short amount of time. There's changes that I would like to see Eve roll back temporarily, just to get a sense of, hey, this is what we did 10 years ago. There was a huge player base back then. Let's try it again. Let's see what happens. Maybe explore those options. It could be interesting for everybody involved. People who used to play could hear about this and they'd be like, what? Eve is getting back some mechanics that I lost and I thought would never see again. Maybe not a permanent ice pelt, but it could be anything.
I mean, that's a good point. So we got 10 minutes. It's the 10-minute warning time. So is there anything that we haven't covered? We've kind of been on this one topic, but is there any other angles to this that you want to make sure that we hit? I have a couple other questions. Uh,
Go for it. The questions. I don't
so,
have anything off the top of my head.
what skills do you say that ganking gives you?
It gives you awareness for sure because after you start ganking, you realize that if you start mining, like, huh, like maybe I should look at local, maybe I should look at DScan because that's what you're doing as a scout. Um, and it implores you to look out for your surroundings. Make sure where you are and what you're doing is safe or whatever your perception of safe is. Um, for mining, I've always been more active since being a ganker because there are some people that know who my miners are and some people that don't, obviously, but you always assume that everyone's out to get you, and you kind of understand that with the mentality of ganking. Unless you're only a ganker, then you kind of there's not much lessons to take out outside of that.
To
But I feel
defend
that.
the gank,
Hmm?
one must become the gank.
Oh yes, it's and like I'll never forget the first time I got ganked. It was just like wow, and I was outside, way off doing something else, and I came back and I found myself in station, and it was the most confusing thing ever. But once I figured it out, I stopped dying needlessly, and I got better at the game, and I was able to play it more efficiently, not just not being not AFK, but just reaching out and learning more about people and the surroundings that I was in. And I don't know, it's a great social medium to reach out somebody through a gank. You get a lot of interesting material.
Well, they did make the song "Killing is just a means of communication."
Oh yes.
Um,
And actions speak louder than words. If I say I'm going to kill you, that doesn't mean anything versus you've just been killed by gay pride. Boom. Explain yourself.
what what about the consequences of ganking? Like because the problem is that the loss of security status and other things like that doesn't actually impact.
It doesn't mean much.
Yeah, there is no long-term consequences to ganking, and there may not be able to be long-term consequences to ganking just by the nature of design, with the fact that people can just make new characters.
I mean, it's kind of hard enough that anything they do further would just be, I don't know, detrimental. Like I feel like the real OP move that CCP did was allowing tethering in high sec. Like
What
that's the ganker's high point when they can just sit there and tether
what
undisturbed.
you said make it hard enough. What's so hard about having enough catalysts on grid and Uedama Gate?
Udama. I
I
mean,
mean,
outside of that, not much when you have that many catalysts.
so then where
But
is the where's this
you
skill
gotta
coming in?
for overpowering. I mean, that could be said anywhere. Udama is not always 50 catalysts on grid. There are smaller ganks there to be considered, and a lot of interesting baiting that goes along.
Right, but you said that it's hard enough already, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, if it's not in Uedama, like where is this complex gameplay playing out of the actual ganker beyond just, do I have enough catalyst to kill this type of ship? Yes, go.
Well, I mean, it's not just catalysts that are used. There's also
Sure.
thrashers. Many people use oracles,
But my point is a
talus,
math
or
problem, right? You know how much
coursers.
DPS you can
Well,
do.
it can be a math problem, but it could also be a much different problem if the target is moving or they have logi or there's an anti ganker bumper on board or something like that. Or someone messes up. It's Eve. Anything can happen. You have to be prepared for that. It needs fast reaction times. Whereas, in certain situations in nullsec where instant preparation is needed to kill a target, in nullsec you have tie-dye. There's plenty of time to kind of get things ready and get things going. But like for a gank, you need to be on the dime, instantaneously ready for anything and everything that's going to happen. So it's a skill of alertness and focus, I would say.
Here's a question, just completely abstract.
Mm-hmm.
All other things being equal, ganker plays perfectly, hauler/miner plays perfectly. Who wins? Does the defender get away, or does the ganker get the kill?
They both die. Or sorry, no. I would say the miner. Uh, hmm.
Just like
You got
what I'm
me there
saying,
with
like
that one. I don't know.
because the thing that I'm hearing is that what I'm hearing is that the difficulty comes from, if you mess up in this execution, then it might go wrong.
In the instance where both are perfect, I would say that good fights were exchanged, regardless of who. If if both sides did it perfectly, that's what happens, because that's what it's about.
I would argue that the miner gets away because they detect you ahead of time and get off grid, or
Mhm.
the hauler gets away because they detect you and get and
Or the
don't go
miner
in.
barely survives with like 1% hull. You know,
That's fair, but
like that would be a victory on both sides. It's like, oh, you were
I
one shot off.
I would argue that would mean that the ganker didn't play perfectly, because if the ganker shot and didn't kill, that means the ganker messed something up, in my opinion. Because again, it
Or
just
the
boils down to
miner
math.
started moving. The miner could have started moving uh, towards a particular rock with an afterburner. Like there's all sorts of factors to consider that could cause gank failures to happen. So
Fair enough.
it's not always just about math. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's just wild. It's Eve, and Eve is wild.
Well, at the very least, I think that you have proven that your perspective um, is it, it represents an aspect of the game that you, myself, and obviously CCP can agree is important. And at the same time, is a perspective that a lot of people either don't share or can't articulate well. You have done both, and therefore, I think that in spite of whether or not CCP really wants to have it be in their permanent record that they had a CSM member named Gay Pride Boom, if they can get over that, then I think that you would definitely be an excellent CSM candidate. Since
Thank you.
they got an opportunity to change your name or make you change your name and they chose not to, I can only believe that that means that they are prepared for it. And therefore, to those of you who believe that, you know, an interesting high sec is important, to those of us that believe that high sec is about engagement and education, this is part of it too, man. And we can't lose the baby for the bathwater. And
For
so
sure.
I think that that's an important message to have. So thank you for coming on and being willing to talk it through with me, in spite of the fact
Oh,
that
my pleasure.
I'm sure on the surface it seems like, again, the one disadvantage is it is difficult to get people to take you seriously, but it is easy to get people's attention. So,
Well, those who don't take me seriously, they need to calm down.
well, maybe a few more people will take you seriously now, and maybe even a few of them will vote for you. But we'll find out in a few more days.
Oh, yes.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, 07.